Hello everyone, I am Ziad, and this is a recording of the Visual3D data processing for the upper body. This will be a casual recording. I'll try to leave in the errors or the issues that I get so that you can debug them with me, and if you have the same issues, you can solve them as well for yourselves. I'll try to be as efficient as I can, but also I'll try to keep this real time so that you get to see how long does each segment and part takes. All right, so with that out of the way, let's proceed with the first step, which is loading the dynamic trials. To do this, locate the in the top toolbar, locate the folder which has the name open. Click on it. Navigate to the directory where your C3D files were saved. So from Vicon, you have exported your data as C3D. Make sure that you only select the dynamic trials. Here I have 3 different trials. 2 of them are dynamic and 1 of them is static. So I'll select the 2 dynamic ones and I'll hit open. And you'll notice here under motion files, we have the 2 dynamic trials. Okay. Next step is to load in the static or the calibration trial. And to do this, locate the model menu. And then the first item here, it's called hybrid model from C3D file. Click on it. And here you are prompted to select the calibration file for the new model. So again, recall I had 2 dynamic trials and 1 static. This is the step where you have to select the static trial only. Okay, so select the static and click on open. Now we have to assign the dynamic trials to the static trial. To do this, we have the static trial selected, as we can see here. Now here we have to check check these boxes in order to associate these dynamic models with the static trial. So I'll click on the 2 check boxes here and then I'll hit OK. All right, now if I go back to workspace, you'll notice I still have my motion files right here, but I have a model calibration file right here, which is associated with both of these. So if you have reached this step, you are in good shape. All right, let's go back to models and let's zoom out. If you zoom out, you should see somewhere in your workspace, you should see some markers. So this is the force plate for reference, and these are the markers. We're doing the upper body, hence why the markers are elevated from the platform or from these grounds, the floor of the lab. Okay. Next step here is we need to create our segments, because right now we only have these blobs, these spheres that are meaningless. Now the good thing is if we click on one of the spheres, sometimes it doesn't let you. Yeah, there you go. It does have the labels, and these labels came from Vicon. And these labels are very important because we will use them to define the segments. Okay, so the first segment that I'll create is the thorax ab segments. And before I get too carried away with creating the segments, I should have the HAS motion guidelines next to me so that I can associate and I can know which markers belong to what segments. Okay, so let me open that. Here it is, and this is the HAS motion marker set guidelines from CourseLink. So I want to put this to the side, just like so. And then also I want to put this to the side. That way I have a lot of, that way I can see kind of what's going on. And it's going to be much better for you. If you have 2 screens, put this on one screen and put Visual3D on another screen to make sure that you see everything clearly and you don't miss anything. All right. So let's do the thorax ab segments. Here under the segments tab, in the segment name here, we click the drop down menu and we choose the thorax ab segments. Okay, here we keep this as Visual 3D, we don't change it. And we should click on the kinematic only. The reason being here is we're not processing any forces or any moments. We're just interested in the angles for the purposes of this tutorial, so we don't need any kinetic data, only kinematic. All right, so after you've chosen this, click create, and next you'll be prompted with this, which have a lot of fields, but if you bear with me, we'll fill them slowly but surely, and we will be able to fill them properly according to the guidelines on the left. So, as we can see here, on the left, we have RAC, RAC, and LAC, LAC, and we have RICT and LICT. So, when we think about the proximal and the distal, we have to make sure that we choose the right ones here. So, for the proximal, which is these, so these three boxes, we want to pick the markers that are closest to the pelvis. And that is how this thorax ab segment have been defined. Proximal means closest to the pelvis. So for the lateral, we want to choose RICT. So you can either write RICT here, and then it would automatically detect it, and then you can see it's being highlighted. Or you can click on the drop-down menu. You'll have a lot of markers. You want to find RICT and click on it. So here it is. I click on it. So this is the first marker, and it's under lateral. The second one, under medial, we choose the LICT. Okay, LICT, and then it has been highlighted, and it has been selected right here. Next, for the distal, we're moving upwards. So, following the same pattern, above RICT we have RAC. So here I'll just write RAC. We see it highlighted. Fantastic. And here we select LAC. It's highlighted. We're in good shape right now. Okay, so we have all four are highlighted and are correct. Next is we don't have to worry about this section. Next, the select tracking target section. We want to choose everything else. So we have this one, which is CV7. And then we also have the LBAC1 and LBAC2, these two. We also have the LV1, which is this one. And we have two more, which is the UBAC1 and UBAC2. Okay, so in total there are 6. All right. After you've done this, yours should be the same. If you followed the thorax ab model 1, you should have something similar to what I have. If you are using the thorax ab model 2, yours would be, these 4 would be the same. So these 4 would be the same, except your tracking markers, you will have 2 fewer because you only will have 4, whereas with this one we have 6. Okay, so now we can click on apply and we can build the model. So now you'll notice we didn't get anything. There's no skeleton, there's no thorax. This is because this has been disabled. So to view the segments, you can either click on this button or press on F5 on your keyboards. I'll click on this button, and then now we have a thorax, and it does look appropriate, and I think the orientation makes sense. The orientation does make sense. This is where the arm would be, the right arm and left arm, and the pelvis. So it does look great to me. All right, now we can close the tab and move on to the next segments. Next up, we have the right upper arm. So to do this, we go back under the segments tab, segment name, we choose the right upper arm. And then again, the type is Visual 3D. And as for this, it is kinematic only. And then hit create. Next, we have again two sections, the proximal and the distal. Now this might be a little more intuitive than the thorax because the proximal starts off where this ended off, right? So proximal is proximal to the thorax, which is the parent segments. So the upper arm, the right upper arm segment is the child segments, and your thorax is your parent segments. So everything here is proximal and everything here is distal. Okay, so the proximal lateral marker here should be the RHGT. How do I know that? Well, if I go to the upper arm model on the left, right here, model 1, this is the model that was used in this experiment, and this is the right hand side of the body. So what did I say earlier? I said we should choose the RHGT. RHGT. So the RHGT is this back one, the back marker, in the right side of the body. This is analogous to this marker right here, RHGT. So I'll choose this as the lateral one, RHGT. You can see it's selected. Next up is the medial proximal marker. This should be the RHLT, which is the one that is in the front right here. There's almost a line between them. If we extend the line would be touching these 2 points and will be parallel to the floor, almost. All right. And as for the lateral, as for the distal lateral, we want to choose which one. Is it this one or this one? Think about what is closest to the body and what is away from the body. So if this arm were to close in, this is the medial and this is the lateral. So this one, if we click on it, the name is RHLE. So this is what we will put here, RHLE. And this one is the RHME. So click here, RHME. And there you go. So we've selected all 4. And as for tracking, we should be fine by clicking this box because this would use the current markers as the tracking markers. So you can click on this, use calibration targets for tracking, and this should be good to go. If you have issues, at the very end, once we build the whole model, all of the segments, and we apply it to the dynamic trials, if we notice that there's weird behavior, what we can do, we can come back, edit the segments, and then choose to add the remainder markers. But otherwise, we should just press this and we should be fine. Again, if you have weird behavior issues in terms of movements, then consider coming back here and play around and select, for example, this marker as an additional tracking marker. Okay, so right now we can press apply and build model, and we get the right upper arm. Okay, now we can hit close tab. Next up is the right forearm. Okay, so we're working in order. So here, again, we open this up and we select the right forearm. We keep this as Visual3D. We toggle this, kinematic only, and we press create. Now here, same situation as the right upper arm. The proximal is where the previous segments ended. So these two would be the proximal, lateral, and medial markers. And these two are the distal, lateral, and medial markers. So here I will select the RHLE, which is this one. For the lateral, for the medial, I'll select RHME. And then for the distal, I'll select RRSP. And for the medial here, I'll select RUSP. And now we've captured all 4. Again, for tracking, instead of, we can go here and choose all of these 4 different markers, but that will take time. If we click on this, this will use these 4 markers as our calibration or as our tracking markers. So this saves us a lot of time if we utilize it. So now hit apply and build model, and the forearm is visible. And the last segment in the right arm is the right hands. So under the segment name, choose right hands, Visual3D, kinematic only, hit create. For the right hands, proximal are these 2, and distal are these 2. So the proximal lateral marker is going to be the RRSP, and the proximal medial marker is the RUSP. The distal lateral marker is going to be the RHM2, and the distal medial is the RHL5. Okay, so we've selected all 4. As for tracking, again, we'll check this box, we'll hit apply, and we'll hit builds. Okay. Now the right arm is complete. However, I want you to pay attention with me. Does this look, I think this looks similar to this. The upper arm, this forearm looks similar to this one. But the hands, does this make sense? Does this look right? So the wrist ones are fine, right? But if we look at the right hands here, these 2 markers should actually be almost in the middle of the hands. And here, these markers are almost outside of the hand, or they're at the very tip where the fingernails are. So we do have a scaling issue here. Sometimes this does happen, and for the most part, it's not going to matter too much, because if we are looking at the wrist angle, wrist is right here, so that's not going to matter too much. But for the sake of making sure that our model looks complete and makes sense and looks visually appropriate, what we can do is we can modify a segment after its creation. So to do this, say you close this tab and you're outside and you want to come back and modify this segment. What you need to do is double click on these segments. You'll come back here to the same settings as we saw earlier. We need to go to the segment properties. Click here, then find this button, which is called Rotate Scale Graphic Model. Click on it, and you will get to this menu, which allows you to move the segments, to rotate the segments, or to scale the segments. So scale the segments is what we need to do, because our right hand is way too small. So I'll click on scale, and here I get 3 different scroll wheels, essentially, to adjust the scale of the width or the height or the depth. Now, if you move one of these, it's going to be independent of everything else. So you can kind of, very fast and very easily get something that doesn't make too much sense, because these numbers are not matching. They're not scaled together. So what I found earlier is 125 in all directions makes the most sense and is actually very similar to my hand's geometry. So you feel free to choose a number that it makes sense visually for your situation, for your case. You might go larger or smaller. But once you figure that out, you can put it here and press OK. And now our hand looks a little bit better. It's more proportional than what it used to look like. Okay, so that is the right side of the body. Next, I'll go through the left side. So to get started here, now we can kind of, again, do the left's upper arm, left forearm, and the left hands. So to start, the segment name, I'll choose left's upper arm, select the kinematic only, and hit create. I'll try to go a little bit faster right now, just because this is the second time we're doing this. But if you need to pause, feel free to do that whenever you'd like. So yes, let's, again, feel free to have this nearby so that you can kind of relate and know what each marker stands for. But I'll go ahead right now, and then I'll input the markers. So for the proximal lateral marker, this should be the LHGT. For the proximal medial, this should be the LHLT. You can see them, they're selected. For the distal lateral, this should be the LHLE. Distal medial, LHME. And then we'll hit use calibration targets for tracking, apply, and builds. Okay. Next is the left forearm, kinematic only, create. The proximal lateral marker here is the LHLE. And the proximal medial is the LHME. The distal lateral is the LRSP. And the distal medial is the LUSP. Click on use calibration targets for tracking, apply, and builds. Close tab. And last but not least is the left hands. Hit on kinematic only, create. For the proximal lateral, this is the LRSP. Proximal medial is the LUSP. Distal lateral, LHM2. Distal medial, LHL5. And use calibration targets for tracking, apply, and builds. Now we have the same issue. This is quite small. So we'll do the same steps as we did for the right hands. We'll go to segment properties, rotate scale graphic model. Under the scale tab, I'll make this 125 to match the other hands. 125. Okay. And we are done the upper body. The last thing we want to tackle is the pelvis, just to tie everything together and for the completeness of the model. Okay, so to do the pelvis, what we do is right here in this configuration, we actually have enough markers to try out the Visual3D pelvis and to try out the Coda pelvis. So I'll get started with the Visual3D pelvis, and then I'll end with the Coda pelvis. So I'll do the Visual3D pelvis. If you have enough markers for the Visual3D pelvis, feel free to watch this part and follow along. If you don't have enough markers for the Visual3D pelvis, meaning you have 1, 2, 3, 4, you have these 4 markers, and you have these 2 markers at the back, but you don't have this one and this one. If you don't have these markers, the RFT and LFT, if you don't have them, that's fine. You can skip and watch the Coda pelvis demonstration in a bit. Okay, so I'll get started with pelvis, segment type Visual3D. I'll hit kinematic only, and I'll hit create. So for the Visual3D pelvis, it's a little bit of extra work because we have a lot of fields to populate, but that is fine. We'll do it one at a time. So for the proximal lateral marker here, we want to pick the RICT, which is this guy. The medial, the proximal medial, we pick LICT. which is the one that is the matching marker, except it's on the other side. Don't get carried away with the lateral and medial, with the thorax and with the pelvis, because it's not as intuitive as what we've seen before with the arm. Okay, so don't get too worked out with the naming. Just follow along, and if something doesn't make sense, you feel free to try other markers, make mistakes, and see if make a mistake and see if it does make sense to you. Then you can try it. If it doesn't, then you're learning. Okay, so all right. So now we finished the proximal. Next is the distal. The distal lateral marker here is the RFT, which is this guy, and the distal medial is the LFT, and that is this one. So now we've done all four. Okay. Now you'll notice we don't have any other row to put the ones in the rear, so we have two more at the back right here. I should really pull up the Visual3D pelvis to show you here. So what we've done here is we've done the RICT, LICT, and we've done the RFT and LFT. All four are done. Now we have two at the back, which are called the RIPS and the LIPS. In order to include those into the model or into the segments, we got to add them as tracking markers. So here in the select tracking markers or select tracking targets, what I'll do is I'll choose all of these four markers. So I'll find all of them. So I have the RICT, RFT is right here. Let's get that out of the way. And then RICT is right here. Then we have the LFT and LICT. So the ones that I've just selected are these four. And then the two additional ones that we're missing are the LIPS, LIPS, and the RIPS, RIPS, right here. You'll notice here on the right, we have all 6 selected, which is the goal. Next, I'll hit apply and build. And then you'll see we have a pelvis. The alignment is pretty well, actually. The alignment is pretty well. We can look at the back here and everything. Like, there is no gap here. There's no overlap. Everything seems to be really well. One thing, though, that I don't like with the Visual3D pelvis in general is the scaling. For some reason, it's always downscaled. And that is one of the main reasons, or one of the reasons why I push forward with Coda pelvis, because the scale feels much more natural and feels better. Okay, so again, if you have Visual3D pelvis, you can continue ahead and you can use this. This is all right. I've shown you this. Now what I'll do is I'm gonna delete the segments. I'll create a Coda pelvis segments, and then we can continue and move ahead with the rest of the tutorial. So I'll close this tab, and then I'll delete this one. Right click, actually left click, and click on delete selected segments. Then here I'll choose pelvis, and for the segment type, click here and choose the Coda pelvis, and hit kinematic only and click create. I'll scroll down here to the Coda pelvis to see that we only need 4 markers, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4. And because our naming from Vicon matched the names here, Visual3D is smart enough to know and to auto detect which marker is which. All right, so it's looking for these 4 markers. It has automatically grabbed these 4 markers and it has highlighted them. So all we need to do here is we click on one button, we click apply, and builds. And that is it. The pelvis is created and it's a part of our kinematic model. Now, at a first glance, it looks fine right here. The scale looks better, in my opinion. Maybe it's actually a little too large if you think about it compared to the upper body here, to the thorax. But it's, I don't know, it feels a little more, it feels closer to real life than the previous pelvis. What I'm trying to allude to here is if you were to rotate this model, you'll see very quickly how off we are. See how much off we are in terms of placement. So yours might be much better than mine, or it might be much worse than mine. Okay, and that is kind of that's the costs of pairing a coda pelvis with the thorax ab model 1, because the thorax ab model 1 is expecting a visual 3D pelvis. Again, sometimes visual 3D pelvis doesn't have the best scale. So if you have a coda pelvis like I do right now, then I'll show you a way to fix this and to make sure that it looks a little better in terms of alignment and positioning. So to do this, we'll follow a series of steps that are very similar to what we did with the hands. We'll go to the segments properties, and then we'll go to the rotate scale graphic model. And here, instead of scaling, I'll click on move. And with this move, I have 3 sliders. One that moves backward and forward, another one that goes left and right, and another one that goes up and down. So what I'll do is I'm going to try and see what each one does, because quite frankly, I'm not sure actually which one does what, because it gets disorienting when you can rotate so much. So I'll try this. I'll see what does this do. Okay, so this actually, yes, it did, I think, bring it forward. Yes. Okay, so right off the bat, like, this looks much better. Though, if you notice, we are quite high. So what I can do is I can use this guy, slide it down a little bit. You see this? Slide it down a little bit more. A tiny bit more. This is too much. Okay, this is good. And then maybe left and right a little bit. Okay. What do you think? This looks... There's a gap here. So maybe I should move it a little bit more up. If you want to do it fine, maybe, control it manually like this. Okay, the gap is gone. So I think this looks much better than what we had earlier. What do you think? Okay, so you can feel free to play around with this. You might need some rotation. If you do, there is a rotation feature here as well. You might have to scale it a little bit, either bigger or smaller. You do what you need to do in order to make sure that your model looks all right. It doesn't look like a mess. All right. So now that I've done this and I finished, I'll apply, and then I'll build the model. And then I can go back to segments. One second. So landmarks, segments, there. And then I'll just click on segments right here. All right. So now we are officially done the segment creation phase. We have the thorax ab segments. We did the right upper arm, right forearm, right hands, left upper arm, left forearm, left hands. Then we experimented with the visual 3D pelvis a little bit. Then we deleted that and we did the coda pelvis. Okay. Next thing on our agenda is to remember, all of this is still on the static model. Okay. So in order to get useful information, we really need to apply what we've done here to the dynamic models. So to do this, all we need to do is click one button and click it once. You find the recalculate button, click it once, and now this has applied all of the work we've done here into the 2 dynamic models. So it has computed the pose for them. So after that has been done, click OK. And then you can go back to the workspace. Then you can open up a dynamic trial. So I can double click here, and then I'm presented with this model right here. And if I were to press the run button, I should see some movement. Now this is actually running slow. I can increase the speed. There you go. So you can see here I'm just doing some lateral raises. So that's the exercise. And yeah, you can see everything looks fine for the most part. You know, there's this gap that is forming here, but that's not a big deal. It's not a major issue. Everything looks like the ball and socket here looks fine. Wrist and elbow, they look fine, and the thorax looks fine. All right, and that is one of the files. We can look at the other file by going to this menu and selecting the second one. And this is the second one. So here we can have a look to see how this looks like. And I don't see any visible issues at the moment. So sometimes, I'll say this right now because I've seen this a lot. Sometimes you have the elbow or the wrist just going at different angles and it's all acting weird. And it's not like, this doesn't look like an arm. It looks like half an arm or whatever. If you're in this boat right now, if this is what you see on your screen, then consider doing the following. Go back to models and open up whichever. So if you have an issue with the left's upper arm, open that up. Okay? And make sure that all of this makes sense and you didn't switch something. If you switch something, make sure it is all fixed and it's all similar or the same as what I have. Okay? Now, the other big issue is the tracking. Okay? Sometimes you might choose the wrong one by accident. So you might click on LFT by accident or CV7 by accident. Okay? So be careful with that. I like to use calibration targets for tracking, similar to, so however I did it, please go backwards and make sure your segments follow the settings that I chose. But if you still have issues, if you followed my instructions and you have issues, sometimes you want to actually include another marker. So for this one, for example, we have a spare marker right here that we can involve. So if you have issues, consider adding this marker in. If you don't have issues, then don't worry and don't bother adding it in, because it can actually over-define your segments and it can actually cause more issues. So I'll put this back the way it was, apply build and close. I'll head back to workspace, open up a trial, and I can continue this. Again, verify everything looks good before we continue to the next step. Okay, so the next step is, you probably guessed it, it's to perform the calculations. Because how would we're doing all of this reconstruction and creating the models for one purpose, to get some angles or to get moments or to get something out of this. Okay, we're not just doing it to look at it. That could actually be also meaningful, but we do need some data and we do need some numbers to graph and plot and make sense of things. So in order to compute some data, head over to the model tab and then click on compute model based data. And you'll be presented with this dialog, with this window. Here you want to give a name. Okay, so maybe we want to do trunk angle. So we write trunk angle, and then in the model based item properties, we want to pick joint angle. Okay, if you're looking at joint velocity, you find joint velocity here and click on it. But right now, for the purposes of this example and this demo, I'll just stick with angles. Okay. Now, next is we do need to define what is the segment and what is the reference segments. So this depends on how you want to view it. Do you want to view the trunk angle from the perspective of the pelvis or from the perspective of the trunk? Okay, so really what I'm saying is, do you want the trunk to be the segments and pelvis to be the reference segment, or vice versa? Okay, you might have your own method and you might have a solid answer as to why you want the trunk to be here or here. I myself right now, I don't have that because I'm just trying to show you how to calculate these things. But maybe for your experiments, you really want to look at it from one segment and use the other segment for reference. Right now, I'll just kind of stick with segment. I'll choose pelvis. Reference, I'll choose the thorax ab. Yours might be switched, which is fine. Okay. So after we've selected this, I'll click create and we get this confirmation. We have 0 errors here. And this is just verifying that for the first dynamic trial, the computation was done. I'll hit OK and then I'll close. Now on the left, you should see a new item pop up, which is called link model based. If you open this and open original, you will see the trunk angle that we just computed. It's showing up right here. You can right click, graph XYZ, new graph, and this is it. This is the data for the X, Y, and Z directions or components of that angle. If you were to run this, you should see a live, this is the cursor and it's showing you the angle wherever that corresponds with the movement, right? So you can always pause, and at this exact pose, this is the X components, Y components, and Z component of the movement as well. So to apply a filter, we go to pipeline, and then in the left we have a lot. This is the pipeline workshop main menu. We have a lot of different features. The one that I'm interested in right now is the signal filter. Specifically, I want to apply a low pass filter. Okay, so the low pass filter came here. You can click this button or double click and it would come here. And once you are clicking on it, you will get the details. So this is a 6 Hertz Butterworth low pass filter. Okay. Now, this is now waiting for us to choose the destination or choose essentially where do you want to apply this filter to. So what I'll choose, I'll open up this targets, and then I'll select original. And I'll click here. I'll click here and I'll click original. So it did see how original is selected. I'll hit here, I'll hit without prefix. And it did select it right here. So targets is this folder, and then original is inside of it. And once this has been selected, click execute pipeline. And then hit OK. And that is it. So now if I were to actually remove all graphs and plot again, the data is a little bit smoother. We can actually even look at the individual trajectories. So if I look at the CV7, so let me open this guy up. So look, this is CV7. This is the data for CV7. If I click on the filtered version, sometimes, there you go. So this is much smoother in my opinion. You can, you can export this and take a closer look at it all you want, but the filter did indeed was applied to the data, and we can confirm by checking individual markers or checking our graphs that we plotted. All right. Next, what we'll do is we are ready to create reports, because essentially we got the data that we need. Next, we want to put them in a report and we want to export. So to do this, head over to the reports tab, And then here, simply click add in the bottom. And then here you have a lot of different options. Don't get too overwhelmed by what's going on. Let's focus on a few different items here. So here in the x-axis, we'll leave the same. Y-axis, we want to keep this as the link model based, keep this as original. In the name, we'll select, maybe let's select trunk angle. And then here, we're selecting the X components. Remember, there's X, Y, Z components for each of the angles that we computed. And next, we can click on OK. And then this is the graph right here. Okay, so that is the graph. That's the X components of our trunk angle. We can insert a page after. And then here, we can edit selected. No, sorry. We can add. And then in page 2, we select trunk angle, we select the Y components, we hit OK, and page 2 has now the Y, and we can do the same thing, insert a page after, and then maybe here, instead of adding the Z of the trunk angle, maybe I want to add the X of my elbow angle. So it's all up to you, however way you want to do this, but I want to add this now, so I'll click on OK. And then now I have my elbow X, my trunk Y, and my trunk X. Okay? Obviously, this is just showing you a preview. And for the most part, if you were to use this in your reports, you will most likely lose a lot of marks because this is an incomplete graph and you most likely want to do some processing on the data. You might want to clip it, average it, you do you. So we essentially, moral of the story is we want to export this data outside of Visual3D to use it and to process it further. So to do this, what I'll do is I'll click on, you should actually click on this guy, not this one. Okay. I think both of them should work, but I like to stay consistent. So I'll click on here. I'll click export selected. And then here, keep this as it is. Don't change anything here. And click export. And this is going to ask you for what name should this txt file be called. I'll call this trunk X. Okay. I can maybe do the same thing. Maybe I don't want this. Maybe I looked at this. I don't like it. I want to go here. I export it. Keep this as it is. Hit export. And then this is the elbow X. So if we want to have a look at the data, we can always view the data by going to the directory or going to the folder path where we saved it. So if I were to go here, my folder, I go to here, and then you'll see I have the elbow X and the elbow X and the trunk X. So if you open up one of them, you should have a file with the data that you've exported. Okay. So this brings me to the end of the tutorial. Just a very quick recap. Here what we've done is we first loaded the dynamic trials by going to the folder icon here and loading only the dynamic trials. Okay. Next we went to model, we went to hybrid model from C3D file, and we loaded the static model. Okay. Next we went to next, after we did that, we assigned the static model to the dynamic models. We got a pop-up and we clicked on the checkboxes. Following that, we were presented with the different spheres that were labeled but had no segments. They were just floating. So we went ahead and we created all of these segments, as you can see here. Then we clicked on recalculate, and that applied the static model to the dynamic models. Okay. Then we went to workspace, and then we opened up a dynamic model. So this is the dynamic model. All right. Just one thing I want to mention, and a big reminder, is after you do any computation or apply filters or anything, you should press recalculates, because without recalculates, your data, the filtering will not be applied to the data, or your data might not be, or your calculations might only be applied to one file. So when you press recalculates, all of the steps that you've done on that single file will be applied all across. Okay, so that's just a important reminder. Okay, so after this, we performed calculations. So we went to the model, compute model-based data. We gave a name here. We selected joint angles. We defined these segment and reference segments, and we clicked create. Then on the left-hand side, we got the link model-based. We got the different computations here. Then we viewed one and we said we needed filtering. So we applied a filter. To apply a filter, we went to the pipeline. And then on the left, we found signal filter, low pass. And then here we selected our original markers here. And then we executed the pipeline that created these filtered trajectories of individual markers. And then after that, in order to apply and see the filtered data for the elbow and the trunk, we click recalculate, and then the data will show much smoother and much more clear. Okay, and finally, we created reports for the different data that we want to see. Okay, by clicking on add, and then choosing what component we need. And then the last step, but not least, the very important step, is to export the data. So we clicked on the data of interest, hit export, and then export it. And then at the end of the day, we have individual TXT files with the data that we can now take to programs like Excel or MATLAB to work with them. Okay? And that concludes this tutorial. Thank you so much for listening and watching. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me via email or visit me at my office at Thorn 2308. Thank you so much and take care.